Tariffs absolutely play a role in putting American workers, American firms, American investors on fair ground vis-a-vis our trading partners like China.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here with you, and I just want to thank Jacob quickly for the opportunity to be here. And I know you've had a team working on this, hearing great things about this conference, and we're really fortunate to have some amazing participants. I'm going to be your moderator, and we're going to hear from Peggy Johnson, who is the CEO of Agility Robotics. Peggy? And also want to invite Stephen Miran, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. So he is a key person in the administration working on such key policies, and we're really grateful that you're taking the time to be with us. And such an important topic, talking about robotics, talking about our economy, manufacturing, bringing manufacturing back, and the role of robotics in this area. And what I'm going to do is kind of alternate back and forth and ask questions, and just appreciate your expertise. But one of the things that I learned, Peggy, is that you have, I think it's 200 humanoid robots out and working in factories, doing different things right now. Tell us, what is a humanoid robot, and what distinguishes it from other robots?
Sure, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's 200 by about the end of this year, so we are now producing those in our factory right now. Yeah. So a humanoid robot is a very human-centric device, though it's not necessarily a carbon copy of humans. Ours stands about 5'9", 160 pounds. It can pick up about 16 kilograms, or about 25 pounds. And it basically can do the type of work that we're having a real hard time filling these jobs. We're mostly focused on material handling right now, so moving boxes from one area to another. And they can step right in. It's autonomous. There's no tether. That means the battery has to be on them. And they have end effectors, which sometimes can look like hands, but generally are more like grippers, because that's a better tool for the job.
Mm-hmm. In what sectors do you see these robots being most effective in? What different areas?
Well, largely they are in places like logistics warehouses, so think an Amazon warehouse, manufacturing facilities, and then any segments of the economy that are moving boxes around. So pharmaceuticals one, they move a lot of boxes around. Automotive has big, long bins of product that have to be moved line side. And these are the sorts of jobs that humanoids can step in and take, because it turns out all of these factories are built for humans. And so the aisles are as wide as humans, shelves are as high as humans can pull things down from and go down to the floor. So that's a range of motion that a humanoid needs to have.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Stephen, I wanted to get your thoughts on, when you think of manufacturing onshore, when you think of, I can remember, the last few decades, people thinking the United States wasn't going to manufacture. How does AI fit into this idea of the United States being a major manufacturing power once again?
Thanks. So thanks for having me, and thanks to Jacob for the kind invitation. Look, there's numerous reasons why you want to concentrate manufacturing in the United States. They're good jobs, they're high-paying jobs, but it's also critical for national security. We will have problems defending ourselves if we don't have a robust manufacturing sector here in the United States. That means we need to engender foster such a factor and create situations in which companies want to build manufacturing capacity in the United States, want to invest in the United States. Now, advanced technologies are a critical part of that, because the weapons of the future, manufacturing of the future, jobs of the future, all that revolves around advanced manufacturing, new technologies like the ones you work on, and new technologies like I'm sure many of the folks in the audience here are working on also. And so we want to create an ecosystem that's robust, that creates the inputs into into the industrial ecosystem we need to know that we'll be able to defend ourselves regardless of situations that come up, and whether parts that we're reliant on strategic adversaries for become suddenly unavailable or something.
I'd talk with you a little bit about strategic adversaries and kind of what China is doing in this space. What are your thoughts on, we know that they have a lot of, dual-use technologies, military, civil fusion, everything is subservient to the Chinese Communist Party. How do you view this area of robotics competition? Are we ahead? Are we behind? And what should we be doing to make sure we continue to lead in this area?
So I don't know about this specific industry, but what I will say is that China has been making big investments in trying to gain hegemony and in some cases monopolies over some critically sensitive technology areas. And I know that it's a priority for the administration to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of the technological frontier, and that we maintain our innovative edge so that we can remain leaders in those fields, because they're essential not only for driving the economy forward, but to make sure, as I said before, that we could defend ourselves, keep our shipping lanes open, and make sure that we can support the global trading system.
Yeah, I mean, it's very concerning because the government in China is putting a lot behind that industry. We see a lot of robots coming out. I think there's a new company launched about every week. I get the press releases on those things. So there's a lot coming out, but let's be very clear here. Our technology is not behind. There's nothing that we're seeing right now in the humanoid space that is more innovative than what we have done right here in the United States, and we should be very proud of that. However, what we do need is to be able to keep our lead, because they are catching up. They're just putting out so many robots, which means they're collecting a lot of data, and data can train AI foundation models. So we really have to keep an eye on this, stay ahead of the game, and do whatever we can to keep our lead in this space.
How do you view this in terms of American jobs? I mean, one of the arguments you think about is, will this take away Americans' jobs? Another counter argument is by bringing it back more manufacturing and different kinds of jobs, it actually enhances Americans' opportunities. But what's your sense on that?
Sure. So I'd like to mention the story of the bank teller, if I can. And I think it's worth pointing out that when the ATM, when the automatic teller machine was introduced, there were widespread predictions that the bank teller profession would go extinct and we'd lose, hundreds of thousands of bank teller jobs. But in fact, the opposite happened. Because it became cheaper to operate a branch with fewer bank tellers and more ATMs, the number of branches exploded. And so even though you had fewer tellers per bank branch, the number of branches went so high that the number of tellers actually increased. And so rather than the prediction that economists had that this technological advancement would result in widespread job destruction, it actually increased the number of jobs in this profession. And that's why economists know that productivity growth is the real driver of long-run economic prosperity. What you want to do is do more with less. And if you are using advanced technologies that each human is more productive, it doesn't decrease the demand for workers. It just allows the workers that you have to produce more. And there will always be a demand for more stuff because Americans want prosperity. And that's why the administration's policies are aimed at delivering that prosperity for Americans.
So basically what these humanoids can do right now are the jobs that we can't find people right now in the US to fill. There's over 1 million jobs in these sorts of facilities, and people don't want them. The reason is because they are backbreaking, they tend to be mind-numbing, very repetitive, very dirty, very injury-prone. So as less and less people pursue those jobs, the ones who are in those jobs tend to get overtaxed, and the injuries increase even more. So why is this happening? Part of it is our love of next-day delivery. A lot of these logistics facilities are just trying to move product, and they need people to keep that product moving. And it's as simple as, moving boxes over and over again. This is the perfect task for humanoids. And now as we begin to onshore manufacturing back here, there's, again, that labor gap is only going to grow more. Again, humanoids can step in there.
When I ask you what you need in terms of government policy, you had mentioned that you want to see common sense regulations, that safety is a part of that. Could you talk to that?
Safety is a huge part of that, and we need policy that, first of all, understands what these machines can do. They are brimming with sensors, so we have a LiDAR camera that does depth perception, so the robot can see obstacles in its way. We've got 7 RGB cameras that are looking around and assessing the environment. So all of these sensors bring in a whole lot of data. And so we have to make sure that's protected, and any companies who are making robots understand PPI and how to protect data of the customer. That has to be done. The second thing about safety is these are human-like figures, and they have a lot of power and a lot of strength. We're moving from 25-pound packages to 50-pound packages. These things can swing around and actually be very harmful if there's not good safety in place. This is another area we haven't seen much of from the Chinese robots. They tend to throw a lot of robots out there. We don't see what's called e-stops on the back of them, which is a big red button that you can hit and the robot will come down very safely to the ground. You need to ensure that when you become in close proximity to humans, that you stop, you assess how close that human's getting. The closer the human's getting, we bring the robot down to the ground. Let the human pass, it comes back up again and goes. You just never want an accident in this area. So that is definitely one area, smart policy. The second area is the talent. One of our co-founders told me the other day that when he graduated from Carnegie Mellon's Robotics Institute, he was one of two mechanical engineers. We just need more talent in this area. So anything we can do to encourage that to move forward is good. And then the last, basic research.
Are the robotics programs, I see a lot of high school competition. Is that helping with the supply of people in this field?
It is. Dean Kamen is a creator that we have here in the US, and he has a great high school robotics program that has done a very good job of sparking interest in young kids to pursue mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, the robotics institutes that are in a number of our universities. And so it's helpful to that. We need more. Mm-hmm.
Stephen, I wanted to ask you, when you think about this technology and you look at that on the screen, it's really remarkable. And as Peggy had mentioned, the U.S. has been so innovative in this area. But obviously, China is going to try and do more in this space and create a dependency. We've seen them doing that with battery technology, other kinds of technologies. They also, heavily subsidize. They have these opportunities where they'll try and drive competition out of business by dumping and overcapacity, and we've seen that playbook time and time again. What can we do to make sure that the U.S. continues to lead in technologies like this and make sure we have a fair competition when it comes to China and other countries?
The overall goal should be one of making the United States the best place on earth to do business. We should create an economy in which everyone who wants to invest in new technology, manufacture advanced technology, open a plant, open a facility, hire workers, expand their business, thinks the United States is the obvious place to do it. How do we do that? Well, we put American workers and firms on fair ground vis-a-vis China, countering their subsidies, countering their lack of reciprocal market access, standing up to their unfair trade practices, as the president is doing. We create tax incentives that make America the most competitive economy in the world from a tax perspective. And that includes not only extending the president's tax cuts from 2017, but further business taxes that make it smart to invest in the United States. Things like full expensing, things like bonus depreciation that provide tax incentives to creating an investment boom in the United States that people say, hey, this is the affordable place to do it, this is the competitive place to do it, this is where we want to invest. And then finally, it's making sensible regulatory policy. We have so many situations in which we have cascading regulations and companies that are subject to hundreds of thousands of pages of regulatory code, and each one of those lines is a cost of doing business and a delay of doing business. And if it takes 7 years to get the permits that you need to open your facility, well, that can make it difficult also to get the financing to do so, because nobody wants to lock up the capital for that long. And it can prevent you from doing the work that you want to do. The regulatory system is in the way of firms wanting to invest and maintain their critical edge. And to maintain America's role on the technological frontier, to create these advanced technologies that will underline manufacturing of the future, we need the United States to be the most competitive economy in the world and the obvious place to do business.
Do tariffs play a role in that with respect to China, and especially in these high-tech areas? And what do you think of the, permanent normal trade relationship, the most favored nation status that China has enjoyed since 2001? Is it time to change that?
So tariffs absolutely play a role in that. And as you mentioned, China engages in numerous unfair market practices. They subsidize their exports and then dump them on foreign markets to drive competition out. We open our markets to their products without getting reciprocal access. It wouldn't surprise me if we had a number of people in the audience who've been trying to sell products into China for a long period of time and are still waiting for their licenses to be approved. And there's all sorts of asymmetries in that trading relationship. And tariffs, and the reciprocal tariffs that the president has brought on to China are reflective of that asymmetry and corrective of that asymmetry. And so tariffs absolutely play a role in putting American workers, American firms, American investors on fair ground vis-a-vis our trading partners like China. And the president has shown that these tariffs can be an effective tool for doing so. The most favored nation and permanent normal trade relation stuff, I can't get ahead of any trade processes, but I would say that the tariffs are a tool that we've been using. The tariffs are the tool that we continue to use, and I don't see any immediate change to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, tariffs have not been a problem for us. We manufacture in Salem, Oregon, and I will say the state of Oregon has been a wonderful partner for us. We have a big facility there, 70,000 square foot facility. We make all our robots right there. Our components, about 80% come from the US and about 20% from overseas, but only about 1% of that comes from China. So we're actually in a pretty good position from a tariff perspective. The 1% that does come from China are the LiDAR cameras. We actually don't make them, though there is, I just learned, a company coming to the US or starting in the US that will make LiDAR cameras. And I think there's a couple in Europe. But those are a very important part of humanoids, a critical part of humanoids, and that part does still come from China. But otherwise, we're looking for second sources for even that 1%.
How do we address the threat when it comes to robots? I think Unitree is a Chinese company that manufactures a dog robot, and you see examples of how that's used in military applications. And with this sort of dual-use technology, should we, as Americans, how do we make sure that our either taxpayer dollars, our capital markets aren't investing or participating in this kind of technology going to China that could actually be used against our men and women in the military?
Well, first of all, if you've seen some of the videos, China is putting ammunitions onto robots, and they're very scary videos. So two things. Our company has taken a pledge with our general purpose robots, which means they can do several tasks in these kind of environments. We'll never arm those. DoD, however, needs to have the technology, because those things that we see in the videos, we have to be able to defend ourselves against. Absolutely. And so we're very open to having those kind of technology discussions with the DoD. Two things going on here. You want people to be comfortable around robots, which is why safety is very important. And so that's why you don't want to take these general purpose robots and arm them like we've seen them do with the robot dog and things like that. It's just very scary. But we also want to make sure that we always have the best technology in the hands of our military.
Yeah, we've seen in the area of drones, for instance, DJI, the Chinese have manufactured, I think it's 80% of the drones that are used, often in law enforcement and other areas. And as our committees looked into this, it's often because of some of these unfair practices where they're driving competitors out of business and then create a dependence on those products. And we certainly wouldn't want to see that happening in this area of robots.
Exactly. I mean, that is what happened. They're doing the same play now with humanoids that they did with drones. We did have a drone business here for a while, early on. My family's big into drones, and my husband's a pilot, and we just like anything that flies, and it has all gone over to China. So this is what we have to protect against with the humanoid industry.
Mm-hmm. In terms of supply chain, you mentioned the LiDAR. Are there other areas that we should be thinking about in terms of onshoring here, making sure that we aren't over-relying on China or other adversaries?
I mean, there's a part that some of the other companies use called planetary roller screws. We actually don't use them, but those parts are critical to some of the other humanoid companies in the US. And that's a part that I think we have to make sure we have a second source here, keep our eye on that. Otherwise, that could halt all of their production.
Mm-hmm. And I gather you guys don't use them, but things like magnets, rare earth, stuff like that China has monopolized the supply chain on through subsidizing and dumping and undercutting all of their production, seems like a sensible thing to focus on when it comes to national security. You don't want to be in a situation in which someone else says, hey, you can't build what you want to build by cutting off some monopoly key part into the supply chain.
And one part like that can bring the whole line down.
Yep. And so things like that, where one part like that can bring the whole supply chain down, that seems like a sensible area to focus on.
Agree.
What should we be looking forward to for 2026 and beyond? What kind of benchmarks? You had mentioned, Peggy, that you're eventually this year going to have 200 robots. You can actually have the capacity to do, is it 10,000?
10,000.
A year.
Mm-hmm.
So as you think about, the opportunities ahead, where do you see this going, and how should people be thinking about the future when it comes to humanoid robots?
Well, for sure, as I said, as we onshore more, there's going to be a spot for them there to fill in a lot of the gaps. But eventually, and it's starting in the enterprise space and in the workspace, but eventually, over time, I think we will see robots in our home to do the things you don't want to do. It doesn't mean they'll come in and take over everything, but if you like to cook, they don't have to cook, but they might do the laundry for you or mow the lawn. So we really see this technology and the evolution and the further development of which we're learning right now in these factories. We're learning a lot of skills that will get us there, say in another decade or so. It will give humans choice. If you like to do manual labor, you like to do gardening, that's fine. Maybe your robot is doing something else, but there'll be choice in whether we do manual labor or not. And I think that's a good objective to have.
So are we going to see a parable of the bank teller in a few years with respect to robots? And
I mean, I would certainly think so. I think that new technologies give us the ability to produce more with less. And it's not the case that you want less, you always want more. And so I think that we will be in a situation in which technologies like you're developing, other, AI, robotics, and other advanced manufacturing technologies are going to just increase productivity and allow American firms to produce more with fewer resources. And that's exactly how you push economic growth forward in the long run. And that's what American economic growth has been powered by for 2 centuries now.
And how do you, it seems like, when you think of the movies about robots getting out of control, when you think about AI and the fears that people have, what happens with AI, how do you have a sort of a message that encourages young people to go into this space knowing that there are such positive uses? Sometimes people focus on the fearful things, whether it makes good drama, but how do you get that next generation? I'm thinking of when Sputnik was launched, it created this urgency for rocketry and young people wanting to go into the field of of science and math, and it seems like we're at a point right now where so much of our economy depends on these advanced technologies, yet I'm not sure that we're engaging young people enough in this space. But any thoughts on that as we close things out?
I think for me, if I was a young kid looking at this space, I have to tell you what is magical is when you can give a command to a robot and it performs that command. That's all possible because of large language models now. And we're doing that with our robot. We do things that our people can really relate to, like sorting laundry. I just showed a demo of robot sorting laundry, and I just said, sort the white clothes from the dark clothes. And Digit looks and picks up the white clothes. He does what my husband hasn't been able to do in 30 years, but he can actually sort the white clothes. And it's called the embodiment of AI. It's one thing when you're using ChatGPT and it brings you an answer in an instant, that's amazing. But when you can tell a physical device to do something and it responds, it's just magical. And I think that kind of spark will really get the next generation going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to emphasize that what you're saying is completely the case. We need to increase the workforce for advanced manufacturing if we're going to bring this stuff, if we're going to further this stuff in the United States, bring more of it back to the United States. And that's absolutely critical, and it's critical from a cultural perspective, as you're describing, but it's also critical from a policy perspective. And the President's executive order on workforce modernization is a first step in that direction. It provides for 1 million new specialized apprenticeships to go into the new technologies of the future, AI, advanced robotics, things like that. And creating that workforce is going to be critical to these industries.
Well, Stephen, Peggy, thank you for sharing your insights with us. Fascinating discussion. It's really, obviously it's about these high-tech machines, but it's also about supply chains, about opportunities for Americans and jobs and bringing manufacturing back to America, which has been such an important part of our history as well as our future. So thank you very much, and always good to be together talking about these things. So thank you.
Thank you.